And a good Tuesday, Birds fans. Appreciate you streaming in here. I'm Birds 365 with Mac, McMullen, and McDonald. Here to hang with you for the next 2 hours. Yesterday was Monday, April 1st, which is April Fool's Day, and we didn't pull any April Fool's Day pranks on you. We wouldn't do that to you. We care too much about you guys. But it was not a good day for Philadelphia sports. I can guarantee you that. Phillies losing extra innings. Not good. They're 1-3. Flyers losing overtime. Came back, tied it up. Got a goal late to get at least a point out of it. But then ugly turnover in OT, and they end up losing. Zon Reddick officially announced as a New York Jet. My personal opinion, not a good thing. It was a pretty good day glad it wasn't a bad day for everybody. Reed Blankenship had a pretty good day yesterday, didn't he, Johnny Mac?
Yeah, he did. I guess I will because there's so many people in the chat. My dog, I just want to say, passed away. So it wasn't a great day for me either. I'm one of those weirdos. I get way too, and I don't want to sit here and cry on YouTube. But anyway, thanks for all the kind thoughts. And yeah, it's difficult but I'll get through it. But I appreciate everybody, and I appreciate you because I told Jody before I didn't want to talk about it, but everybody was saying stuff in the chat. It's nice to have people saying nice things in the chat, and that's how good my dog was. So it tells you how special she was. But yeah, somebody had a good day at least, and good for Reed Blankenship because, performance-based pay basically rewards guys who don't have high salaries. So a lot of late day 3 picks, undrafted guys who hit. I mean, that exactly describes Reed Blankenship. So, he gets an extra, basically just under $1 million, which is meaningful, obviously. Well, it's meaningful for anybody, but, as an undrafted guy, Reed doesn't make millions and millions compared to the average Joe. He does nice, but obviously, that's a big deal for him from that standpoint. And then the Eagles, and they did this with TJ Edwards a couple years ago. They essentially bought his restricted free agency season early by extending him a year. And it tells you how far Reed has come. And I'm a little surprised. I thought Reed was really good last year, one of the few bright spots on a bad defense, except for the injuries, had a tough time staying on the field. Kind of mentioned this about Avonte Maddox, similar with Reed Blankenship. I think his style hurts him a little bit, and he's got to figure that out because you got to stay on the field. But he played well, and I see everybody, wanting to replace him, and I'm like, I'm not so sure I want to replace him. And I'm fine with CJ Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship as my safeties. A lot of people want more and more and more, and Justin Simmons, and I get that. But, I think he's doing a tremendous job as a young player. And at some point, as you always say, Jody, you got to forget about the pedigree and just relate to what's going on the field. And he was a good player last year. He really was.
He, like the entire defense, slumped badly at the back end of the season. They lose 6-7, and it was much more so for me on the defense. It was the offense. Offense doesn't get a free pass, but if you're doling out responsibility of the collapse, much more of it fell on the defensive side than it did on the offensive side. But I really, John, and this we discussed it yesterday because of the Zon Reddick thing. I'm going to point at the coaching for that defensive collapse last year. And when I say the coaching, that surely includes Sean Desai. That surely includes the head coach, Nick Sirianni, who, if we're to believe him, was the sole individual who decided I need to strip Desai and hand it to Matt Patricia, which failed miserably because as bad as Desai was for me, Patricia was worse. So I'm going to give a whole bunch of those guys a little bit of a pass, not a complete pass, but a little bit of a pass on, what happened in the second half of the season. Well, the entire Eagle defense. I dare John McMullen to come up with one guy that you can say last year played. I won't even ask him for better as well in the first half as they did in the second. Who played as well in the second half as the first half on the Eagles defense? My opinion is no one. They take an over in that category. I can't come up with one guy and say, well, yeah, at least he came on as the season went along and he played better. No, it only got worse when it's that big a collective, when it's 15, 16, 17 guys, however many you need to throw in a group because of guys shifting in and out on the defensive line, when they all get worse over the course of a year, that tells me something. And it tells me it's the coaching staff more than it is the individual players for the collapse. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to go, yeah, but Reed Blankenship went backwards. Why would you extend him? Because he's a good player. And because as a staff, they failed last year on defense. So I got no problems. And I think it's Howie Roseman, once again, ahead of the curve, gets these things done so he doesn't have to deal with it at a later date. I think it's a fine signing by the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's got a nice upside as a 25 going on 26 years, a little bit older because he the COVID type of things, and that's not typical of the way the Eagles draft. But they didn't draft him, so they took a little bit of a roll of the dice. And I remember that year he was sort of the run of the litter of the undrafted class when they give out the guarantees, and all of a sudden he turns out to be a player. So you never know. Hopefully the Eagles learn from TJ Edwards and say, because they got, when they bought his restricted free agency year, they got a career year out of him, but then they let him walk.
Right.
And, as an Eagles fan, you should hope for the same thing with Reed Blankenship as he continues to grow over the next 2 seasons. But yeah, if he plays well, maybe forget about that UDFA tag and maybe just re-sign him. Maybe they learn something from TJ Edwards. So we'll see moving forward. But yeah, at least somebody had a good day, as you mentioned, Philly sports as a whole. But Reed Blankenship, nice little stipend, $923,000.
And the point you made about Reed getting hurt last year is true. He missed some games, and he does. He plays a very aggressive game, and he's not afraid to sacrifice his body. I'm not putting him into the category of their slot corner, Mr. Matic. Just
no.
He had several years of missing time. Reed stepped in and played as a rookie, which people weren't banking on, didn't know that was going to be the case. And you were there in preseason and go, this Blankenship guy didn't give him any bonus money, but he's actually making some plays. So he fought and earned his way onto the field, and he didn't get hurt in his rookie season. Got hurt a couple times last year. I'm not ready to put him into the
Reed's like solid. Reed's like 205, somewhere in that range. And I always joke that Avante's 180 and he thinks he's 205. Well, Reed's 205, but he thinks he's 230. So it's all encompassing, it kind of goes to how you are. So he's really, built like a safety. I just think, and you learn, the best example of that is running backs. A lot of them try to dip their shoulder early in their career, and then they learn. Emmitt Smith was probably the best ever at that. Just step out of bounds. When you get as much as you can, just step out of bounds and save that bump card. My first WrestleMania reference of the week. So I think he's got to learn to save a few more on the bump card, so to speak.
Yeah, I want to see a little bit more. There's something to be said for a player that finishes every single tackle, that's going to try and separate a guy from the ball every time he gets a chance. Is there an inherent risk to it of injury? Sure, there is. But there's also the possibility of a big play. I'm not going to try and dictate to Reed Blankenship just yet how he should play the game. He hasn't gotten to the point where I go, he's an injury risk waiting to happen. I'm good with the kid right the way that he is. And again, because I questioned Howie Roseman in the Reddick trade yesterday. This is another area where Howie Roseman has been superb as a general manager of the Eagles. He picks guys. He specifically evaluates guys. He gets potential negotiation hazards out of the way by doing extensions at a time. Now, they guaranteed some good money for Reed. Over the next 2 years, and certainly the first year, they bump up this upcoming year, which he was already under contract for. They're going to bump up his money and then get the second year thereafter, his fourth year in the league, relatively cheap, under $4 million for both of the 2 years, all of it guaranteed. which is the reason why he decided to say, yeah, let me get this money rather than get to restricted free agency right away. If they're going to guarantee the money, I'm going to take the money. I think he's worth it. I think he's going to be a significant player for the Eagles, even if they go out and get a Justin Simmons, which with every passing day, it looks less likely, except he's got to sign with somebody, doesn't he, Johnny Mac?
Yeah, you would think. I mean, he's one of those guys. There's always a few that hang on longer than anybody expected, and they're still going to get big money. Jadeveon Clowney was kind of that guy for years. Jadeveon just goes from team to team to team, but he always gets a big deal because he always produces. And I think that's going to happen with Justin Simmons. I still think wherever he lands, he's going to get a big deal, but I don't think it's going to be in Philadelphia. And this is another indication, as you mentioned, essentially $4 million fully guaranteed, 3.935, I think is the number. But he can also earn another 1.375
Right.
via playtime and Pro Bowl escalators and things like that. So, you know, it helps. It works on both sides. Very cost effective for the Eagles for a starting level player, and it gives him the opportunity to earn more money if he keeps producing. So I think it's a win-win for both sides. But I do think it's an indication that, hey, let's roll with CJ and Reed Blankenship, and I have no problem with that.
The only other possibility when it comes to Justin Simmons is, and we discussed this the day they signed him, CJ playing slot corner, because he's done it. He's done it well. Do I think he's a better safety than he is a slot corner? Slightly, but it isn't like the massive drop-off that the Eagles saw this year with some of the guys they tried to play at slot corner. Yeah, miserable failures. I think CJ would go down there and be just fine. As of right now, the Eagles don't really have a slot corner. They've got a couple of bodies, but they don't have a true slot corner. We have no idea when, and I asked you this last week and probably the week before, Isaiah Rodgers, Jeff Lurie specifically brought him up at the owners'
hyped
meeting.
Him up too. Hyped him up
Exactly, and yet he is not been activated yet. And he was eligible to be activated after the Super Bowl. So we're now a month plus from when he was eligible to be activated, and no word from him or the Eagles or the NFL. That's the most important one, because they're going to decide whether he's activated or not. We all just assumed, okay, well, he's got to sit the year, and then as soon as the next year rolls around, we'll be ready to go. No, the new year is come and gone, and they still haven't activated him. So that's a position still of need until he gets officially. Truly, we should wait until we see him out there on the field, because he hasn't played a lot of slot corner. His game seems to make you believe that the transition will not be that bad, but he hadn't done it. So until we really see it with our own two eyes, do they have that position covered? Well, they would if they signed Justin Simmons and moved CJ down to that position. So there are still some moving parts in the Eagles secondary. Reed Blankenship is not going to be one of them, and that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and don't forget Tyler Hall. I would put the kid they signed from Las Vegas. He's more of a natural slot corner. Plus, as we had Andrew DeCecco on yesterday, off his pro day tour, there's a lot of slot corners in the draft. I think they might go that way. Yeah, it's difficult to play a young player in that position. We saw that last year, though. But in theory, if you draft a kid to play the slot, he's going to be more ready to play in the slot than if you're trying to play Sidney Brown there or Eli Ricks there, who aren't slot players. So maybe that helps a little bit. And then as far as CJ, when he talked to us in his reintroduction, he specifically said, I'm a safety. So I wouldn't rule it out, like you said, Jody, if that nothing works for them. And for some reason, April 15th is the date I would keep an eye on for Isaiah Rodgers, because that's the first day of the Eagles offseason program. If nothing happens before April 15th, I'll start to say, well, what the hell's going on here? But as long as he's cleared before April 15th, which is coming up, today's April 2nd, so less than 2 weeks, then I would say, what's going on here? I picture Roger Goodell's desk with a big inbox with papers Maybe he's got a lot of stuff to get to. He'll eventually get to Isaiah Rodgers.
Oh, he's got a bunch of underlings, I'm guessing, that could help him out with stuff like that.
You think?
It's if you'd be so kind, just move the Eagle paperwork on Isaiah Rodgers up a couple spots on there.
April 15th. If he's not reinstated by April 15th, that would surprise me.
They got some worries and issues. All right, he's Johnny Mac. I'm Jody Mac. The Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Good for Blankenship. Hassan Reddick officially talked yesterday. One thing I really am questioning that he said, we'll get into that over the course of the show. Carson Wentz, a reuniting of Eagles. We'll give you the details on that. And we do have a draft-specific guest in hour number 2. But we got an Eagle-specific guest coming up next. Our buddy Mike Sealski, lead columnist from the Philadelphia Inquirer and host on WIP on weekends. Sealski's next here on Birds 365.